as of today, we've made a handful of 360 documentaries. And they really are more than just transportative pieces where look around at this beautiful landscape. We try to actually tell narratives in this medium, character-driven narratives.
So some of you who know me know that I spent 18 years at Frontline, so this team is near and dear to my heart. Nowadays, we hold a monthly technology roundtable here at GBH and share ideas. And 5 or 6 months ago, I asked this crew to do a presentation on virtual reality, and it was a 60-minute went to 90 minutes, and people were just like, could not get enough of it. And immediately I thought this is the perfect kind of presentation for MPC, because there's just so many questions out there, and these guys are going to leave a lot of time for your questions at the end. So hang on to those. To introduce who's coming up, you'll meet Carla Borras, who's the managing director of digital video at Frontline. So it's her job to like figure out all the different places Frontline wants to place digital media. Kenzie Audette, who's a production assistant, which really undersells what this guy knows and does. He is a friggin' genius, and he has been singular in helping us navigate the sort of complicated world of virtual reality, because there's so many different ways you can go with it. And Barry Clegg is an editor with Frontline. And Barry actually cut the piece that I showed earlier in the day. So all the different, what we call promos or commercials that you see from Frontline come from Barry. And he is a very special creative talent. And when we got into virtual reality here, we tasked him with figuring out how the hell do you cut this stuff? And he's come up with a lot of different ways for us to approach it so that it gives the content teams some ideas and some flexibility in how they approach any different project. So please give it up for the Frontline group. Thanks.
So I'm just curious, before today, because I know there's some VR demos out there, but before today, how many of you had watched something in a headset, a VR headset? Oh, it's a pretty good number. And that's even before the Google Daydream is released. And so how many of you guys have possibly made a 360 video or a VR film? Got a couple in the house, all right. So we at Frontline dove into the brave world of virtual reality almost 2 years ago when our executive producer, Rainey Aronson, decided to go back to school. She actually attended a fellowship at MIT, it's called the Open Doc Lab, and they were really experimenting with new forms of storytelling, and she wanted, as a leader of Frontline, to be able to authentically talk about some of these new forms, and virtual reality, no brainer, was one of the mediums that they explored at MIT, and she felt right away it just made so much sense for Frontline to be pioneering in this new medium, given that we've been doing visual documentary journalism for for over 30 years. And so we have a lot to bring to the table in trying to figure out how to best tell stories with these new tools. And so as of today, we've made a handful of 360 documentaries. And they really are more than just transportative pieces where look around at this beautiful landscape. We try to actually tell narratives in this medium, character-driven narratives. And just one disclaimer, I want to say that I'm going to be calling all of this virtual reality films, although I know that there's 360, which is technically when you take a fishbowl and you put the fishbowl over your head, and the video is basically spread across the fishbowl, and you're in a fixed position. So even though maybe there's a child in the video here, you can't get closer. It's fixed position. And then what most people call true VR is when you can actually walk around in a virtual world. So some of these headsets, if you create your story in such a way, if you film with the right tools, it will allow you to actually create a virtual world that the viewer can then actually move around in, engage with, interact with, pick up actual artifacts within the world. And so we're actually doing a few of those projects right now as part of a Knight Foundation grant to really explore how we can take the technology to the next level in storytelling. And so we're doing the partnership with Emblematic Group, founded by Nani de la Pena, who's often referred to as the godmother of VR. She got into this and really, her intern actually created the Oculus Rift. So she was very ahead of her time. And so we are working on 3 of those kind of more walk-around immersive experiences, which are going to be really, really extraordinary. We'll have to do another talk about that next time. But I'm just going to, for the purpose of this talk, just call it all VR. So what Kenzie, Barry, and I are here to do is basically just give you the good, the bad, the ugly of VR, and then just sort of demystify the process for you guys and show you how you can dive in. So the good is that there's lots of room to pioneer. And I've been saying this to a lot of emerging filmmakers that we've been working with on 360. It's incredible because it's an even playing space. It's an even playing field. We have veteran documentary filmmakers who, of course, have mastered their craft, have been doing this for, decades. But this is so new that, no one knows. No one has all the answers. And so then the bad of it is you might regret it if, and I'll explain what the if is. And the ugly is the technology right now, and I'll explain a little bit of why that is. And then as said, Barry and Kenzie have some incredible lessons to share. So we've made the mistakes. We don't want you to have to make the mistakes. So we'll let you in on some of the best ways to get started with VR. So here's the good. Again, as said, no one has all the answers. We certainly don't. We're still trying a lot of different things and different techniques. And this is one sequence that I just wanted to tell you a little story about because I think it's one of the best sequences in any of our 360 films to date. And it's really because the filmmakers, Ben Moran, Marcel Hopkins, and Evan Wexler, this trio of filmmakers that went to South Sudan to really bring to life what is going on there because of the Civil War. And that is a growing famine situation, and it's something that it's easy to disconnect from and be like, that's happening over there. I don't really want to engage with it. But if you can tell it in this maybe more compelling way, maybe people will take a moment to understand and learn about what's going on there. And so here they are in South Sudan. This is the 360 rig that they had. And basically what they decided to do, and really to take a chance, but this is a high-risk, high-reward situation, is they put that camera that you saw in the middle of a field when an aerial drop was happening. So in South Sudan, there's a lot of swamplands, which make it near impossible to get much needed food to the people and the refugees there. And so every so often, they'll make a massive food drop. And these are 100-pound bags of rice that fall from the sky. And they risked putting their camera amidst all those falling bags of rice. And they knew, this may mean no more filming, but it could be an incredible shot, and it certainly was. And they actually had to hide behind the tree because you can't be in the filming, and they hoped for the best. And I'll show you a 2D version of the sequence, but I just want to say, if you get a chance, see it out there in the headset so you get the full effect of it. Because why this was so great is that it took advantage of the lack of frame. That is what VR offers. It's not contained to that, rectangle that you're used to. And so they really thought about, okay, what is your normal reaction when you hear a plane? it's to look up. And in VR, you can look up. And again, you have bags falling from the sky in every direction. So it really ended up being quite successful. The camera made it. And so here is the bad. And you're all probably wondering, you're like, why is this Wile E. Coyote GIF playing right now? But the bad is that there is a lot of bad VR content out there right now. I'm just going to be honest. I've been consuming it. And we're really all trying. But there's a lot of people also that are just saying, ooh, shiny new object. Let's just do it. Without really holding your feet to the fire and asking yourself, what's your story and why VR? What is VR going to add to telling this story? And so the reason why I have this Wile E. Coyote cartoon up is because this was something in my animation classes my professor really tried to bring home. It's the idea of, okay, so you're in an art class, you've got that bowl of fruit, that you could paint in a really realistic, lifelike way. And people did that for centuries. But that was before photography, and that was before you could film that same bowl. So you have to ask yourself in animation, again, what does this tool allow me that other mediums don't? And so for this, obviously, he's defying the laws of physics, right? And so I think with VR, it's the same thing. You really have to challenge yourself and say, okay, so what about this new medium? Whether it's immersiveness, it's transportive, it's got a lack of frame, it's an embodied experience. I can't stress it enough. If you haven't experimented with it and tried it on, it's a real cognitive connection. So just ask yourself that question before you dive in. And so the other thing is, oh, we got the technology, do we have it? Oh, I'm missing a slide, doesn't matter. But to the point of the ugly with VR, it's that technology is getting in the way of story right now. So that's part of the reason why we're seeing sort of more rudimentary content right now, and we're all trying and doing our best, but the technology is a real trip up right now. I mean, at the beginning, they were often GoPro rigs, and as many of you guys know, they don't work well in low light situations. The fidelity isn't great. And so people have been experimenting with doing their own sort of rigs with more professional cameras, and there are more professional cameras coming out, but it really is holding the experience back. And that goes for some of the really cutting edge VR technology too. So this is a technology called 8i, and it's videogrammetry. And what that is that there's cameras all around someone who's going to be interviewed in a green room space. And it allows you to capture and then create a 3D version of the character, of the subject actually talking to you, and then place it into a world that you can walk around and you can engage with that person. And it's really incredible. But as journalists, it limits the stories we can tell right now, because right now there's a studio in Santa Monica and there's a studio in Australia, and that's it. And as journalists, what we're often trying to do is shed light in dark corners and tell the stories, give voice to the voiceless. And so, for example, we may be doing a really righteous, important story that takes place in the heart of the Amazon. And it's about a struggle that the indigenous people are having with mining that's going on in their lands. And you're not going to be able to fly one of the people to Santa Monica. So it really is a limiting, expensive technology. But the good news is that there are portable kits that are starting to be made, and it's just a matter of time before I think a lot of these technical hurdles are going to be out of our way. As said, technology is just getting in the way of story. So. And now I want to really just turn it over to Kenzie, who's going to really give you some inside advice based on all the mistakes and lessons we've learned making a number of VR films right now.
Thanks. All right. Hey, guys. So what I really want to talk... Oop. It's going the wrong way. I'm good at this. I really want to focus on some more of the practical sides of getting your feet wet and getting into this process. And for some people that maybe have never done this before or have questions about how is this different than I shoot regular documentaries or I tell, more traditional stories, what do I need to really think about to dive into this? And, first thing you want to do is shoot some stuff. So how do I do that? Well, there's a lot of different cameras out there. Honestly, you can't really go wrong with most of them, but it's about finding that sweet spot and price and sort of ease of use, right? A big theme here that I want to stress on is you don't want the technology to get in the way of your storytelling. So, and how do you do that if you're, trying to get into this? Well, one of the things you can really think about is what kind of camera do I want? Do I want to actually have it be 3D stereoscopic? Is that something that adds to my story? Or is it something that makes my stitching process, one of the sort of new elements to this workflow, exponentially more difficult? And for a lot of this stuff, we're doing both, but from a technical standpoint, actually working with monoscopic 2D cameras is way easier and gets you, more time to focus on your story and your characters. So, what is the difference here? Well, basically, you have cameras that are capturing in all directions, right? Do you want 2 cameras facing in each direction to give each eye a subtly different image? Adds a layer of depth, also adds a layer of complexity when you're stitching it. Another sort of thing is, the level of fidelity in your camera, right? So this is a huge misconception, I think, about where the industry is right now, as opposed to maybe where it's going. What we're thinking about here is, where is this video going to live? How long is it going to be, it's actually viewed for, and what level of quality do I actually need to get out of it? And the huge bottleneck here, truthfully, is not the camera so much as the distribution platform. If you're going to something like YouTube or Facebook, there's a limit to how big this video file can be. I don't want to get too heavy-handed with this, but we're talking like a 4K image, H.264 codec that can only be a certain bit rate. Like these are things that maybe are too technical or sort of dry, but it's something you really should be thinking about when you're shooting. The fact that all these cameras, the differences are really stark between the level of export quality they can put out. This thing is a $1,000 camera that shoots 4K video, which, we're talking 4K and you think that's really large, but we're actually much closer in on that. That 4K image has to be for the entire, she mentioned the fishbowl analogy, so that is the whole 4K image, so it goes all around you. So you're actually getting a much smaller amount. So there's actually no difference in the output between any of these cameras, and they cost anywhere from, $20,000 all the way down to like $1,000. Definitely something to think about. Yeah, I think there is sort of a, benefit to getting some of these cameras in terms of like longevity, and we're not always going to be at this point with the technology, but right now we definitely are. So I just want to talk a little bit about, the workflow for making these videos. And right off the bat, you probably recognize a lot of these, steps. If you're making a traditional broadcast, you do all of these. You export your video at the end after you've mixed it and you packaged it, like, text, who these people are, where they work, and, you color correct and you edit. That's all the same here. We're still even using the same programs, for our 360 videos. When we edit them in Premiere. It's not like you're changing any of that, and I think that's a huge sort of misconception that this is like reinventing the wheel or anything like that. It's not at all, really, So the difference is obviously in the stitching. And, these are all just examples. You can use Avid if you want to edit, and there's other stitching softwares that we use. We've been using AutoPano mostly, but, Video Stitch is just as good an option. And I want to say that these are the tools that are needed to make these videos. If you already have those, then you're good to go. And I just want to demystify the stitching side of it right here. So, is that? I'm not getting anything here. Okay, so, yeah, big difference already, right? Like, we're talking, for most of our pieces, we've been using either a 6-camera GoPro setup or, even a 3-camera setup. this is just one camera's footage for, it's not, it goes way farther. There's way more of this, and it's really easy to just get to a point where, oh, I lost it here. I think it's me. You can get out of control, and it's really, this is a iterative process. You go through, you stitch roughly to get to a point where you can view your footage, you edit the footage, then you go back in, you make cuts. You want to like refine that again at the end of the process to actually get to 100% and to get to that point where you don't have seam lines. You don't want to really worry about that in the beginning, because if you're dealing with 10 minutes of video, you might have like, I don't know, 50 hours of actual just like raw video there. So there's really no point in getting it all perfectly stitched right at the beginning. A lot of this is in just the way these stitching softwares work. It's definitely an art form. You're not necessarily just putting it in, pressing the numbers, and then it's just perfect every time. There's a bit, and I'll get into that here. I think I've ruined it. I'm the worst. Thank you. I'll just do like the signal or something. So I just want to, this is what you get basically. So this is an image from our South Sudan piece. You can see the 6 cameras. These are all GoPro cameras shooting in different directions. If we could, and you bring them into this program called AutoPano. It's just a regular sort of stitching software, and it just does its best it can. It knows kind of like what templates you have, so it can potentially get you to a decent spot with just syncing by audio, and then you end up with something like this. And if we could just go to the next one. So, oh, back one, sorry, dude. So basically, the first thing you do is you find your horizon line and you sort that out. And this is sort of rough right now, and it's fine. You can see right up here, there's definitely some issues, artifacts here and there, if you'll go to the next one. And that's because, it's not showing you the stitch lines. These are sort of the cameras, right? You can kind of see what they captured. And right off the bat, you're like, ugh, this guy, I feel bad for him. That's fine, because as you can see, they actually capture more image than they show, right? And so this is where the sort of design, the sort of level of just experience and working with these cameras comes in. We have that image, we just need to get it from a different camera. So you're constantly doing that back and forth. But this is 30 frames per second, so you never know, things are changing all the time. So it's not really important to get that fixed initially. What you want to do is nail down your story, nail down the shots you want to use. Those frames and those shots should be meticulously crafted at the end. So that's where the cyclical process comes into this, if we could. Yeah, so even with all of that, there's still going to be some issues. I think this is a huge take-home from working with this kind of stuff. You are going to always have to be making compromises, and even in the shot blocking of your shots, you have to be thinking about your stitching. It's not something that any one step gets to be free of. This cow, for example, is really pretty awesome. He's the subject of the shot. But he's in 3 separate cameras. You have to actually stitch together all 3 of these cameras to make this cow a whole image. And so that's why his horn still needs work. Actually, just go to the next one here. So you can fix it like that, but you don't always have, you can see how the 3 cameras are right there. This is an issue that I just kind of want to bring up called parallax errors, where it's essentially, you have 3 separate cameras with 3 separate perspectives on the same subject. One of the things that 360 video kind of struggles with is this idea that subjects that are really close to the image of the camera, this is a huge problem to stitch with and stitch the background, because they actually need separate sort of calibration. So you can do stuff like masking with After Effects, or you can start playing with this idea of just moving them around and around and around, but eventually you just will never actually get there. So for some of this cow, we actually had to go in and into After Effects, get a little bit of the image, mask it over, and just hopefully cover that seam. So this is, time-consuming, iterative, and that's really something to be thinking about when you're making this kind of stuff. So, okay, so I just want to sort of cover, things to think about when you're making these. It's monoscopic is definitely easier, if you're trying to make your video, and these things should be about story first, I think it's easy to say, oh, I want to, have the highest quality video and all the best fancy things happening, but if your story's no good and nobody's watching it, it doesn't matter how nifty it is, like that's a really important lesson. Think about your seams in the shoot. When you're shot blocking your shots, which you should definitely be thinking about doing for VR. If your subject's right here, try to give them their own camera. You don't need to have the camera in the same place every time. You can rotate it. It's totally doable. Think about how close they are to the camera also, because that will definitely have a factor on what you can and can't get away with, and if you have a highly moving background, what you can't plate out. Something I didn't really talk about, but is definitely a factor, is the height of the actual tripod or monopod that you're using. We're all of a certain height and we're kind of used to that idea, but if you're really, really low and the person is this towering figure, that has a huge impact on your experience with the person, It might scare you a little bit. And yeah, this is a cyclical process. I mentioned the workflow in the first one. That's sort of, to give you an idea of like how these steps work, but you are constantly in the stitching part of the process, and I just don't want to under stress that. It's something you really need to be going back to, tweaking, trying again, and we're constantly going through that process. Rough stitch first, and then go in for your final. So I think that's it for me. I just want to pass off to Barry, who's going to sort of talk about how do I not stitch, but I make 360 videos, because that sounds fun. All right, cool.
Thanks, sir. All right, can everybody hear me? Great. Okay, so I'm going to talk about, and Kenzie just talked about this too, is doing some graphical work in the 360 area. How many of you here use or know After Effects, Adobe After Effects? All right, a lot of you. Everybody that raised their hand, you can do 360 now in graphics. It's really actually not that difficult. It's with a piece of software called Metal Skybox. Has anybody ever heard of Metal Skybox or any use of it? Okay. Basically, Metal Skybox is a way to create the real world 360 camera rig in a graphics environment. So if you know how to design in After Effects, if you know how After Effects works, this software will simplify it for you. So I'm going to go over that a little bit right now. And like Kenzie said, the great thing about doing graphics, there's no stitching, right? So a lot of that pain process that you can go through with live action footage is something that you don't have to worry about in the graphics world. Okay, so first things first. I'm not going to try to get too much in the weeds here as far as like a software tutorial here, but I'm going to kind of use that as a way to kind of get through it. So in After Effects, you make a square comp, right? You would think you would normally start with a 1920 by 1080 or like a 4K comp. But what you're going to do is you're actually going to start with a square one, and then the camera rig that we're going to make is going to then create that 4K environment. All right. So after you make this comp, you're going to run this script. There we go, scripts, Skybox Creator, right? And this is what's going to make our 3D camera rig. And here's like the other box here. And if you're using 3D plugins like Video Copilot, Element, actually a lot of the Metal softwares like Freeform, which we've used in our piece, those all work with this plugin, as well as just regular After Effects 3D Space. So after we run that script, we're going to make our camera. And as you can see here, this looks somewhat similar to the GoPro card, right? And you want to stay organized. So this comp right here, which I've just called square comp, that's where we're going to design, right? We're going to design our environment there. This one here that says Skybox Output, that's what we're going to render. That's the comp that we're going to throw into the render queue in After Effects and create this 4K image that we're then going to that will then get loaded into a goggle or put on Facebook, and that will create the 360 environment. All these comps right here, that just say Z supported comp. This is actually something I do in my workflow. I always name a folder Z so it just goes to the bottom so I don't need to deal with it. The software actually already kind of does that. And these comps right here are basically the cameras. I mean, you don't even need to touch them. So I believe it's after this slide. I have a kind of like what Carla had played before, like a 2D version of this graphics piece that we did. So you can kind of see what is going on. Has anybody actually been out to the table out on the show floor here that has seen some? All right, so this is the graphical promo that maybe some of you have seen. It's kind of the first, I want to say like 30 seconds or so. If you haven't seen it, please come over and check it out and ask us questions. Okay, I'm not there yet. Okay, so after we've run our script, we've made our 3D camera rig, and that's actually right there, and you can kind of see there's like a top and a bottom and a left and a right, and here's like our cameras. So these grids right here are just a grid that I've made in After Effects to kind of show you where each of these cameras are pointing. Okay, so the other part of this is if you look at the left, this is kind of like a top left down view at our camera rig, right? And I've actually rotated the main camera and the comp just to the right. And you can see now that I can like see the corner of this 3D box that I've made, right? These grids are just there for reference. So that's how you would actually, you can design all around this camera rig. You know, you can do the top, bottom, left, right, anything that you want. I believe it's the next slide that the video plays. Yes, here we go.
You've experienced Frontline. Now experience Frontline in virtual reality. Surround yourself with stories that matter.
One hit only lasts for 30 minutes. Should we chase it?
It's the most extraordinary job in the world. It's the most profound challenge any individual could meet.
Immerse yourself in places you may otherwise never see.
All right. So with all those movements of looking around, that's what you would do as the viewer, right? I've just made those views to kind of see the environment. But if you were to watch it, that's happening all around you. One thing I wanted to actually notice, I couldn't quite hear over here, but if you notice that all the sounds in those videos where the ribbon's falling around is actually all on the right speaker. Does anybody notice that? One of the things we found out was that, you know, the ribbon's supposed to pull you around the scene, right? So we actually put all the audio in the right channel to give that other cue to not only follow it, but you're listening to it to kind of pull you around this clockwise motion. Okay, so now I just want to show some screenshots of what we've designed here. So this right here is my entire After Effects comp, and there's a bunch of pre-comps in here. There's all kinds of elements in here. And this right here is a top-down view of that first scene where you see the Frontline logo explode out, and you can kind of see the blue packaging, which is part of our show. This is basically the big environment that I created all around. Again, here's like a top left-down view of the world. This next one is the next scene where you see the ribbon kind of go around. Again, this is the top-down view right here. This yellow right here is kind of a 3D mesh tool that we use to kind of bend that ribbon around the world. Right here is like the lighting rig that's within that world, right, to shine the lights on the ribbon and the videos and everything. This is another scene that you're actually not seeing in that preview. It's of a globe that kind of goes to the left. Again, if you come out to the booth outside, you can see it. And this is kind of a top-down view. You can kind of see some After Effects lights shining on the globe, right? Okay, so when we output it, right, one of the things that the software does is every time you make a change, you have to kind of refresh the script, right? So once you refresh the script, it's going to basically create this, right? So this kind of goes back to these grids that I had shown before. this is what you're going to export out of After Effects and then throw into Premiere. Or if you just render right at, this was what your final output would be, right? This is what we call equirectangular. You can kind of see it's all the world kind of smushed. This is like the ceiling. This is the floor, right? This is the front. This is actually the back. Whenever you see something in the back, you'll see it on a little bit of the right and a little bit of the left. Here's the center, right? So again, this is just like the next screen and the output. 4096 by 2048, if I remember correctly. So you're exporting a 4K image. All right. So let me just talk a little bit about editing. Here's the timeline. As far as the editing goes, there's not really a whole lot of special sauce as far as editing. You're still moving. You know, here's all my sound. Here's all my sound design down here, right? So these green blocks, right, are the graphics that I've exported out of After Effects. These blue blocks are actually are pieces of our previous films that I've edited in there, right? So your NLE environment is the same as any other piece of media that you may be creating. And then from there, you would export out like a 4096 by 2048, or you can go a little smaller. I think Facebook likes stuff maybe a little smaller. I don't remember exactly what YouTube is, but you're exporting this equirectangular image, and that's your master. That's like your QuickTime master for like a monoscopic piece, and that's what you load into the goggles, or you upload to Facebook, or you upload to YouTube. This right here is just another visual representation that I did for Jim Sullivan, who mixed this, just so he had a reference of where things were, right? So he wasn't going to mix with like the goggles on and his pair of headsets. He wanted to mix in his Pro Tools environment. So he just kind of said, well, anything that's within this box is at the top of our world. This is at the bottom, this left, right, front, back, just so he could have a little bit of an understanding of what he's looking at. Because sometimes if you're just watching the equirectangular image, sometimes it gets you can get a little lost on what's left and right and so on and so forth. And then enjoy. All right, I think that's it for me. Again, I don't want to get too much into like a software tutorial here. So, but that's, you know, the lowdown on doing graphics. So, all right.
Cool.
Thank you.
Very, very cool. Can you flip one more slide? Just so
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, just our partners up there. Cool.
Yeah, so we're happy.
So I guess
to-
we're questions.
Questions. Throw them at us.
Did you folks have to upgrade the power of your machines to handle all this?
Oh boy, yeah. So, you know, the good thing about working in sort of 360 video is that it's not necessarily as intensive as, you know, some of the walk-around spaces that like the HTC Vive and the Oculus Rift need. But yeah, definitely. I mean, particularly on Barry's end of things, where we're doing these exports that take like what, like 16 hours to do like a 30-second export.
Yeah.
Like,
the render times can be very high.
So yeah, I mean, there's certain specs, you know, I think that we can go into that if you want. Like we use like NVIDIA graphics cards, like some of the newer versions, you know, like the 1080 or the 980 Ti. But yeah, I think it's really just about graphics cards. Like that's what you need to be thinking about. Especially to view stuff in the walk-around spaces, you're going to need that just to view it. Like these are the cards they're recommending. I mean, you can get into the Quadro stuff, but like that's even more expensive. But yeah, I mean, you know, to make this kind of stuff and import and export, you know, whatever computer you edit on that takes a 4K file will be good. The stitching render times can be pretty long, but you know, this is sort of standard fare for 4K video. Basically, think about working in this field is like working with 4K video and how long it takes to import that and how long it takes to export and stitch. It's all pretty standard.
Yeah, I know for my CPU that we're working off of, it's a 4 gig RAM video card. I'm running like 64 gigs of RAM, and it does well. You know, you can, each software that you might be using has tech specs, and I know like AutoPano needs a certain amount of, you know, video graphics as well as metal skybox. But it's not outside the realm of possibility as far as like cost to upgrade your machine. You know, you don't need some sort of industrial light and magic supercomputer to get this stuff done. But you can also, you know, your MacBook Air might not be everything that you need. Who's next?
Down here.
Well, first I wanted to say you both apologize for getting technical. Thanks. You both apologize for getting technical, and I just want to say thank you for getting technical, because now we can actually go try this, which is really awesome, so thank you. And I just had a question. If you shoot with a single camera that has a spherical lens, does that eliminate the need for stitching, or would there still be stitching involved in your workflow?
You're talking about one of the ones that has like the black holes on the top and the bottom. It's like a mirror sort of thing it does.
Yeah.
Yeah, you wouldn't, well, I mean, I think you're always going to have that one line where they connect together. But yeah, I mean, I think I'm not a huge fan of having the huge black holes in your video. I think if you can avoid it, I'd recommend going with a 2-camera setup where you like, you know, like I had that slide with the sort of range of cameras. The first camera on the end there is, you know, this Kodak SP360. There's a couple of different companies making cameras like that.
Yeah, the Samsung Gear 360 is also highly recommended.
And you know, something like that where you're, you know, you're doing one stitch line. They even come with a sort of light stitching software with the camera that's really easy to use. And I think you just get a marked upgrade in quality just by doing that. And yeah, you have that one stitch line across the whole thing, but 90% of your subject is either going to be in the front or the back, you know, and if you can just kind of work around that sort of line, you'll be in a much better spot in terms of quality.
Is that a good strategy to get started without a really high-end computer to save computing power?
Yeah, you know, I was able to do sort of stitching exports on before I upgraded on my MacBook Pro with cameras like that, and it wasn't too bad. I mean, it took a long time, but it worked.
Just the other day, I saw on the Metal site, and the Metal software, if you go to their site, they got great tutorials and all kinds of learning that you can get there. They had actually created, like for the Kodak camera that has two, just like a front and back camera, they had actually kind of made their own little After Effects template to kind of fix that one big seam that goes around just with like internal After Effects tools. You know, they kind of made some scripts where you could kind of slide and feather and tweak it that way too. So.
Cool.
Some questions back there.
Is this on? Yes. I have 2 questions. One is you delved a little bit into audio. I have not had the pleasure of seeing the demonstration, nor have I ever seen VR. How do you deal with field audio when you're out in the field and you're having people look around? How do you deal with an audio person? Do they have also some sort of a 360 style audio setup?
So yeah, one of the things that, you know, we've made sacrifices on is audio. So for really, because of what we're distributing on, and I kind of touched on this, but the idea that like, where is this going and who's watching it? And our current answer was, well, we're putting this on Facebook, and they don't even support 360 spatial audio yet. I think it's coming. So all of our videos right now don't have that capability, although we have shot On the Brink of Famine with a 360-degree microphone below the camera on the monopod. But it's its own, you know, hassle, chaotic sort of moment. You know, good news is that there's plugins for things like Pro Tools, like Spatial Workstation, and you can start, you know, mapping certain sounds to certain places. But that it's its own step that requires a lot of, you know, planning and working on.
And having seen a really wide variety of VR experiences, it makes all the difference if you have spatial audio in the storytelling. It just is a game changer. Because again, with the lack of frame, it's about how can you best direct your viewer to the point of action or an important, crucial plot point that you're just trying to make sure that they catch, because they can be looking anywhere. And so when you have those audio cues, like Barry mentioned too, well, he's got the visual cue of the ribbon, and then he tried to get the audio cue too to follow along. So it really just dramatically changes the storytelling with spatial audio.
Okay, the other question is, how much camera movement? You seem to be setting a camera up, and you're dealing with a situation where, you know, I've seen, well, even when you're in an IMAX theater or OmniMax, which I don't know if they even have anymore, it's can be very overwhelming. So how much of the camera is actually moving, or how much do you place the camera and let, because again, the camera person's going to be in the,
Yeah,
and
no,
you
very,
said they had to
very
hide
astute.
behind the
It's,
trees. So just curious how much.
Very little movement.
Yeah.
There's, I think it's about 30 to 50% of people get motion sickness in headsets to begin with. So any slight motion from the camera for that subset of people, for some people they're totally fine, like it's not a problem at all. But it's a significant portion of your viewers that you just have to be so careful. Like in our last film, we were experimenting with drone shots, so attaching a 360 camera to a drone. It was a story where you needed to get a sense of like the size and scale of something that was happening on the ground there. And so you just have to do your best to like go really slowly, get those few images. And I mean, there's technical tricks, but.
I know for me, I saw some footage a while back of 360 drones, and at least for me personally, anything that was just kind of straight up and down or left and right, I was fine. But they also, at one point, they actually flew the drone kind of up and to the right, and that my equilibrium got off on that. Now that it was just me, and it might not be for everybody, but it's something to consider.
It can be the same when you're looking through a camera shooting out of a helicopter.
Right.
Yeah, I think it's about being gentle to your audience member. You know, I think there's, you know, you can do anything, and honestly, I'm one of those people that I like that kind of stuff. It's more actiony. It doesn't make me feel sick, but like, you know, I've also seen like hundreds of 360 videos of any variety. So maybe I just have like sea legs to it, but it, yeah, I've seen it done tastefully, and it's always done really slowly. And it's not something you should be afraid of trying, but you should definitely be, you know, experimental with. Carla, you're picking. I don't know.
I know. We got a whole bunch back there.
Hey there, so since you've seen so many of these videos, can you talk a little bit more about the bad and the ugly, like things to be avoided?
Yeah, do you wanna take that?
Sure. I mean, I think the big one is, as we said, motion. I think some people just throw that to the wind. They don't care at all, and it's like hugely problematic for, you know, trying to engage a viewer. That being said, there are like some incredible shots. Like there's this one that I saw where they have a lot of movement in it, and they're trying to basically show you different stories throughout this like one little town in Maine, a harbor area, and he goes on this fishing trip. And while some of the shots like from the boat, like, I mean, you'd be seasick maybe anyways, but like you're definitely feeling queasy, but he had this brilliant shot where he put the rig inside a lobster crate and had it go down again really slowly, and it was incredible just to get that complete different perspective, because that's what VR also allows. Like it's just like a complete different perspective. So Kenzie mentioned like, you know, camera height being like important, right? Because otherwise someone's gonna be towering over you, or you're gonna be like towering over some other people. And you can use that to your advantage in storytelling. So if you've seen the Mr. Robot 360 video, there's an ingenious shot where it's written into the story that you're supposed to feel like you're floating above the room, outside of your body. And so when the camera is like located high up in the room, it's brilliant because it really gives you that feeling. So I mean, I guess that's some of the good.
Yeah, I mean, some of the bad stuff, I guess I'll be a Debbie Downer about it. It's easy to think, okay, this will entertain my audience member if I just leave them here for a while. Like pacing just seems like and to be fair, we're working on it too. It's not easy, but you know, I don't really want to sit there and not know what I'm looking at or where I'm supposed to be looking. I want to be guided, you know, as much as this is oh, you know, just get in there and just sort of, it's your choice where you get to look. No, I kind of want you to tell me where to look, and I'll do a little of my own exploration on the side. I think that's a perspective that I think too few people take to this medium. Just sort of setting me in an open field and saying, okay, this is it, you know, look around. It's not really a story, you know, so.
Yeah, I'll echo what Kenzie said is pacing. And sometimes you can go too fast, too. I mean, I know stuff that we've worked on. One of our techniques is to actually show the piece to a group of people. So we get kind of like a sample size of what people are experiencing, because that's really what you're making. You're making this experience, you know? And it's a singular experience, you know, it's for one person. You know, we can all kind of gather around the TV set and all watch it and then collectively talk about what we're watching. But you're creating this experience for one person. So you kind of like, I know for when we did the graphic one, there's this scene at the end, which we didn't show, where like, you know, you kind of get pulled to the back and then you're supposed to then get pulled back to the front for the end, right? Well, when we did it the first time, the first 5 or 6 people we showed, they all said the same thing. I got lost at the end. I missed it. So then we said, all right, well, we need to slow this down to give people time to follow the action, maybe lose the action a little bit, and then, again, come back to where we want them to be. So that's just one of the things that you're going to get is pacing, you know, giving the viewer enough time to experience it as well as kind of pulling it through the story. So.
Over here.
Yes.
Hi, I'm Barbara Seidel. I'm a producer with Northern Light, and we're working on a 360 experience. This is my new lingo, so somebody in a fixed position who isn't walking around. And I have a pre-production question, keeping your stitching challenges in mind. Mm-hmm. So traditionally in creative narrative film, you organize your pre-production so that you're doing all your exteriors next to each other, you're doing all your interiors next to each other, whether they're linear in the actual narrative storytelling or not. If I set this shoot up that way, am I creating just a life of hell for my editor in terms of stitching? Do I still have those sort of efficiency options available or no?
I don't think so. Honestly, it's just really about being organized for me. Like, I think whatever makes it most streamlined for you in the field to get the video in, as long as you're, you know, organizing it well enough for someone to come in without having been there. You know, I think it's really one of those things where, you know, yeah, it's fine if they just had to do it once, the stitch, they could probably figure it out and get all these cameras together. But that's not really what we've noticed happening with our workflow. It's like, you know, we're in the final steps of finishing this film, and we're like going back again to the raw video to get a couple shots or to change this sort of duration on this stitch. And like, that's just something that surprised me. I don't know if it's because we're still learning too, but it just feels like you're going to be going to the stitching software in every step of the process, you know, even in the the production when you're shooting in the field, you know, like one of the things that really sets, you know, Evan as like a really awesome dude is that he, you know, took a computer in the field and was doing rough stitches of his video while he was making it, giving him a better understanding of what he was getting and what he needed more of. It's really a huge hurdle for this kind of stuff until live stitching kind of is seamless and useful, that, you know, you don't really know what you're getting. It's really hard to see. You know, you can get live video feeds of each of your individual cameras and say, okay, great, that's looking good. They're recording at least, you know, but if you can't actually see what you're getting until the last step, it's really difficult, so.
And one other follow-up question, which has now just jumped right out of my brain. Oh yeah, follow-up question, thank you. Is, So in terms of planning your edit, we're dealing with 6 cameras. So is my edit schedule 6 times as long?
I mean,
If it's a 10-minute VR versus
no.
a 10-minute traditional?
No, well, I mean,
it is
what
longer, but yeah.
Yeah, I mean, what you would do is you would take your 6 cameras, stitch them together, and that's your shot, right? And then you would edit that shot into your piece. The editing part of it is still very similar to normal. It's really, like Kenzie said, it's the stitching that can be. What you'll find out in your editorial process is a shot that you've stitched together that you really want to use might not stitch together, or there's something else that you can't fix and it's not working with your story. So it's
That sounds like every other edit that has ever lived.
Exactly. Yeah.
But a good measure of time is like you can have a 10-minute 360 video, right? If you have just one shot, right, it's not going to take you much time at all. If you have 10 shots, 10 different scenes, you have to stitch perfectly, right? And especially if you're using, more than like the 2-camera setup, then that exponentially adds to your stitching time. So it's really about how many scenes that you need to like perfectly stitch together.
So we're going to have to wrap things up. Give it up for Frontline's VR gang.